Welcome to Toronto Real Estate Podcast, your guide to navigating the home buying journey in Toronto. Today, we're zooming in on the 8 essential roles of a great buyer agent. From safeguarding your interests and unlocking market insights to emotional guidance and cost effectiveness, we'll explore a good buyer agent's undeniable value to your home search. Through our real life experiences, you'll discover how the right agent can be a game changer in your property search. Oh, and please don't forget to like, subscribe to, or comment below. We really appreciate it. My name is Ian Busher, and I'm a broker with the Fox Marin team. Keep her number handy. This is Kori Marin, in-house hype girl and resident expert listing broker. And as usual, a good man to know, Mr. Ralph Fox. Hello, Ralph, our analytical, investor-driven, macro picture watcher.
Now, we all know it's a common fact that agents are often thought to be, undervalued, overpaid, and certainly not well respected. In fact, I pulled together some comments that I just recently read on Reddit that I thought might be helpful to shed some light on this perspective before we dive into our 8 ideas. Okay?
Okay.
Here we go. Get ready because this is not good for the psyche. Actually, when I read them, I was a little bit mortified. So be prepared. Okay?
Okay.
Realtors continue to literally be the worst human beings in existence.
Oh.
Number 2, this is why we need to get rid of realtors and buy houses directly using a lawyer, not a sales agent who has anyone but their own interest at heart.
Ooh.
Number 3, I don't know why people think using them helps. All it does is keeps driving prices up so they can make a buck for doing F all. But they will tell you everything they do, and they're still responsible for nothing if something goes wrong with the house that you just bought.
Interesting.
And here, number 4 is my personal favorite. My girlfriend has a video of me going on a rant saying realtors are on the same level as pedophiles. Now,
Whoa.
obviously it's an exaggeration, but is it? Okay.
Wow.
That's just a little glimpse.
That's aggressive.
As to what's out there. Okay. That came from Reddit. And you know that Reddit is a little ranty, but still, that's where you're going to get some real deal perspectives.
I feel like my feelings have been hurt.
I kind of felt like mine were hurt too, actually, to be honest. And I actually really mean that.
Can I say, though, as somebody who knows the two of you really well, as well as the whole team, while there are agents out there like this, that's not us, right? And I was gonna end this section by saying, thanks, realtors who are like that, because they're out there.
True.
Just like politicians and drivers and cyclists, like there's good and there's bad, and unfortunately, it's always the bad ones that get remembered, right?
Yeah, it's a profession that does not gain a lot of respect. And I think it's because the bar of entry to get into it is so low as well. And it just does not help feed into this. If we had gone to, received a master's degree in real estate, for example, or had gone through like a medical training style program for real estate, I think there would be a different level of respect for what we do. So we'll talk about that. I think we're going to get into some of the really good value that agents bring to the table, particularly on the buyer side today. That's what we're going to focus on. It will be interesting to break that down. I also wanted to add this as well. So with the rise in technology, with the rise of AI, artificial intelligence, and all of this public data that's available now, there's also a notion out there that realtors are going to be abolished in the next 5 to 10 years. However, with the landscape changing so much since the 2000s, like with the internet, with sold prices being published, built-in algorithms, like tons of search apps. You can see the history on any property anywhere at any time now from your phone. And with this information available, a lot of people feel that the agent will be abolished from the process. And then, I don't know, the robots will take over.
They'll become obsolete.
Will become obsolete. But this is an interesting fact, and this comes from NAR. So as of 2020...
Can you define who NAR is?
Good point. The National Association of Realtors. Okay, this comes from the US. Okay, that's where that association lives and breathes. So as of 2021, so these are a little bit dated. We don't have like the updated statistics yet, but as of 2021, 88% of buyers use real estate agents or brokers. This is a considerable increase from 2001, when only 69% of buyers use real estate agents or brokers to purchase their homes. So what does this mean? And there's a term out there called decision fatigue. So I'm going to use an example. So for me, I find booking travel really freaking overwhelming. Why? Because when you go online to start searching for the hotel you want to stay in, the flight you want to take, the resort, whatever it might be, there's just information overload out there, and there's reviews, there's different perspectives, there's different pictures, there's like tons of links. You're looking at Expedia, you're on like Travelocity,
Yeah.
like you're on these sites, they're comparing.
Fine print.
I literally am so overwhelmed by the process that I make Ralph do it because I'm like, I cannot book this because there's just so much information. I can't make a decision. And I would just really prefer to have a great travel agent just book this for me. He or she may know me. They know what my budget is. They're going to figure it all out for me. They're going to be like, let's just bring this through the credit card and then just send me on my merry way without having to do all the due diligence. And I feel like since travel has become available to book online, I feel that way about booking travel, as I'm sure a lot of people feel when they step into the home buying process. Is that what you both would agree to as well?
I agree. I think people are overwhelmed. They don't understand the process. They want someone who is doing this on a full-time basis, who knows what the pitfalls as well as the market and knows what to watch out for and how to step carefully and take care of them and get rid of that anxiety around the buying process.
I think there's too much information out there, and so much of that information is conflicting that it becomes very, very confusing for somebody to navigate making a decision, which is the largest financial decision of their life. And you also have to remember they have jobs, they have other responsibilities. Where are they going to have the time, and where are they going to find the right trusted source of information to guide them through what could be a viper's den, especially in a market that moves as fast as the Toronto real estate market?
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it is just information overload. And part of it is having somebody that they can trust who understands the process and understands the market and can guide them through that process and help them avoid all of the pitfalls. And then there's just the whole emotional component. Like, I don't think people realize it until they're in it, but buying your principal residence or spending that much money on an investment is extremely emotional. And it is something no AI, or at this point, no algorithm is ever going to help somebody work through, or a couple work through, or a family work through, or investors work through in the way that another human who is highly skilled at what they do can. And I have an example how I have a close friend and client, and he's very high up at Google. And he owns a number of properties. And one day he said to me when he was looking to buy his principal residence early in his journey, he said, Ralph, one day you add so much value and everything that you do is amazing. You won't be replaced, but this whole process will one day be replaced because I understand technology and I understand how technology can fill in gaps. And so a year and a half later, he finally gets around to buying a place. And I remember sitting in my car and he's like, no computer, no algorithm, no AI will ever be able to replace a human being helping another human being through a process like this, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when you take those three factors and you roll them into one, you realize how important it is to actually have competent, experienced, trustworthy help navigating you through a process like this. It's not about algorithms. And the other thing is all these algorithms for pricing houses, especially in a market like Toronto, are completely they don't work.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at iZillow, where they had this,
Zestimate?
they rolled out this entire system where they were buying properties based on the algorithms on valuations. They lost $800 million in their first year. You have to physically see properties and understand neighborhoods to be able to fully assess proper value in current market conditions. No AI is ever going to be able to understand whether a house is renovated and another house isn't, and the difference of a bathroom and an extension, and does a house have a weird smell to it, and are the floors tilted? Like, these are things that have to be experienced by another human being, and people need assistance with these decisions. This is not straightforward. This is goals, ambitions, lives, relationships, children, future children, grandparents, family. Like, there's just so much involved with this process that it is not going to be replaced anytime soon.
Well, with that in mind, let's kickstart the 8 reasons that a buyer agent is super valuable to the process. And let me rephrase that by saying a great buyer agent is helpful to the process. Okay. Number
Okay.
1, looking out for your best interests. A buyer agent is the dedicated ally in the real estate process, ensuring your preferences and your financial interests are prioritized. This representation can be particularly crucial in complex negotiations or really competitive markets like Toronto's. So, guys, what is the importance of having a professional agent or broker who understands agreements of purchase and sale in detail, can safeguard your interests, can do a pricing analysis, especially when the seller agent's role, so the listing agent's role is to prioritize the seller and the buyer agent's role is to protect the buyer.
Yeah, I think in any negotiation, it's really important to have a strong advocate who can articulate and negotiate on your behalf. Real estate is certainly no different. And having somebody on your side who is protecting your fiduciary duty, first and foremost, making sure that the appraisal works out and the valuations are there, making sure that they're in communication with the mortgage broker, and that you're in a position to move forward with or without conditions, that you have funds available for the deposit check. Like, there are so many moving parts from a financial fiduciary standpoint that are super, super important, as well as understanding, a good agent, will probably talk their clients more out of buying a property than actually buying a property, because their job is to look out for their client's best interest. And most times, even though somebody might be willing to move forward with the property, that property could have all kinds of unforeseen problems with it. And it's the buyer's agent's job to protect their clients, because the listing agent is not looking out for them. And oftentimes there can be problems with disclosure. As we've talked about on previous podcasts, the MLS listing is not an actual binding agreement. So there are things that can be in the MLS listing that should not be in an agreement of purchase and sale in order to best protect a buyer. And so only an experienced buying agent would know how to advise their clients into putting themselves into ill-advised situations when offering on a property, because the way the information is or isn't is not put forward in their best interest.
For sure. I mean, we just did a deal structure right before the holidays, and it was a tough negotiation. And in this particular negotiation, it was very clear that Ralph and I were representing the buyers in the transaction. And it was very clear that the listing agents, who we actually know personally outside of the business as well, represented the best interests of the seller. And it was a push, pull over, I would say, like a 7 or 8 day period. But I mean, Ralph and I worked aggressively to ensure that our people were looked after to every detail when it came to time on the mortgage financing condition, like a lot of rigor around home inspection and a ton of rigor around value and what the value was for the buyer and what this transaction meant to them. And then a lot of due diligence on perhaps selling their current home as well. And so we spent hours talking through different scenarios with them just to make sure that this was the right move for them at the right time. And right at the last minute, I think there was only maybe like 15 minutes left on the clock before the deal would have expired. We got it done. But I think it was a very clear way of showcasing that the selling agents did what they were supposed to do, and the buyer agents, that would be us on this side, did what we were supposed to do.
And one of the real interesting things about that situation was in the listing agent's schedule, they had some very small print in there saying that the buyer, if the buyer did not go through with the purchase prior to close, would immediately forfeit a very significant deposit should they not close. And that's just not the way it works. And having had them do that, our clients would have put themselves in a very bad situation, because there's all kinds of reasons why something may not close. And it could be factors that have absolutely nothing to do with the buyer. And we've seen that before. And so we ended up having a lot of pushback with not just the sellers, but the seller's lawyer. And at the end of the day, we were able to have that removed. And I think it's really important to understand, and this is about one of the criticisms sometimes about real estate agents, is lawyers always think worst case scenario, and lawyers are as much protecting their own butt as their clients. If this world were expecting lawyers to try and negotiate with each other on behalf of clients to get deals, to get transactions done and people into homes, nothing would ever happen. Ever.
Never.
There are some great lawyers out there, but it's very difficult to have lawyers advocate on their client's behalf in a way that is constructive enough to create win-win scenarios for everybody involved. And in that instance, we definitely saw that play out, and we were able to make it in a situation so that everybody was able to win.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on to point number 2. Are you ready?
Okay.
Point number 2.
I'm ready.
Market valuation, strategy, and negotiation. So a good, excellent, experienced buyer agent can make you more competitive in a market like Toronto and possess the skills to negotiate favorable prices and terms. This expertise is invaluable in understanding the nuances of the local real estate market, so the area that you work, and leveraging this knowledge to the buyer's benefit. Again, working for the best interest of the buyer. So how do agents use their understanding of current market trends, property comps or comparisons, and these negotiation tactics to secure the best possible terms?
Usually when I'm trying to explain to a client who wants to lowball on a place is that you can't just walk into a room and say, listen, I want to give you $5 for this $1 million property. Like, let's start there, counter me, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, so going back to lawyers, I usually say it's a bit like a court case. It's like a statement where if I'm going to go to that agent and say, listen, here's our offer. It's lower than your list price. It's maybe lower than your seller is expecting. But here are the facts. Here is the reason why. It's not just an opinion. It's based on this comparable sale, this neighborhood data, et cetera, et cetera. So you're trying to protect your client by using this information to make a case in the hopes that that listing agent will then take the case as well as the offer to the seller to say, this is what they're offering you, and here's the explanation as to why. And it, whether or not it makes any sense to them on their side of things is up to them. There's always opinion in these things. The example that I have 2 examples. One where I used a strategy, and then a few years later, I used it again, which was going to look at a property with buyers who loved it, could see the potential in it, but it was listed way, way, way too high. So we made a first, maybe slightly offensive offer to the seller. And of course, we got the answer no. But we sort of kept an eye on it. And my suggestion was, I think if you're fine with this calculated risk, we wait. And then 2 weeks later, we'll do this again. And because it was overpriced and because we felt that we were very right, we just kept doing that. And in both cases, it took us 2 months to secure the property for the price that we wanted to pay for it, that we felt was justified. And really what it was looking at the pricing, understanding the pricing, realizing that this was overpriced. And if they had the patience and they were okay with the calculated risk, to just wait. And in both cases, at the end, before we submitted the final offer, it was the seller's agent who was calling us to say, okay, are your people still interested? Bring us your offer back. We'll take it now.
Mm-hmm.
A huge part of that strategy also is just not being a jerk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're being very rational, and you're just saying, listen, if we can make a meeting of the minds here based on X, Y, Z. And sometimes the other agent might be like, I hear you, I understand, just my sellers don't see it that way. Mm-hmm. Let's just keep the dialogue going. Right? Mm-hmm. Like that's what a good agent does. A good negotiating buying agent understands that the deal is never not done until it's sold to somebody else or fully taken off the market. So just because you're not successful on your first offer, that doesn't mean that you stop advocating on behalf of your client. And if you can create rapport with the agent and the agent can understand that you're a rational person, and even more importantly than that, the sellers feel that you're not trying to steal the property from them.
Mhm.
You're just rationally trying to approach it in a way that might be different from them, but that you're not actually trying to steal something from them. That is such an important strategy as a buyer agent in the way you present, even if it's a really low offer below a seller's expectations, is you need to do it in a way that doesn't offend them. And you needed to do it in a very reasonable and measured way. And if you do that, sometimes that could lead to something happening much further down the line. And that is something that is very skilled and nuanced that very few agents can do.
And the only reason Ian could do that is because he's tenured and understood his local market. He understood the comps, he understood value, and was confident enough to proposition his buyers and say, hey, I think that there's opportunity in this. We just have to sit back and wait for it to come to us. And that is a very nuanced thing to do and challenging, but you wouldn't know to do that if you were brand spanking new, or you've been in the business for a lot of time, but you just don't do a lot of volume, or you're working outside of your local market as well. So I think market valuation is such a huge asset for the buyer agent, and it takes forever. Like anyone, a lot of the time our clients are like, what do you think this is worth? When they ask us that question, they might text us about a property, or they might email us something that they've seen on realtor.ca, and they go, what do you think this is worth? And I want to be like, sometimes for me to answer that question, that's a 4-hour homework assignment.
Yeah.
For me to really, truly answer the question. And you're looking at different ways of doing that, looking at comparables on the street, the neighborhood appreciation, what the highest sale was, what the lowest sale was. You could be looking at compounding appreciation. What did the purchaser purchase it for, and how much has it gone up since they acquired it? You might be looking at cost to build. You might be looking at price per square foot. I mean, there's lots of ways to slice and dice this data, but this does not just happen by clicking an app and looking at an algorithm. This takes a lot of rigor and experience, and a way for you to be able to present this information as well to your buyer to say, this is what makes sense to me, and this is why. You're not just like slapping a number out there. So huge. All right. Moving on to point number 3. Okay. The value of the buyer agent. Okay. Access. This is actually really big. Access to experienced professionals. So experienced network of professionals. So beyond the great buyer agent is an access to a network of seasoned professionals necessary for the transaction. And this includes awesome kick-ass mortgage brokers, great deal-making lawyers that know what they're doing, inspectors, contractors, designers, and trades. Huge. Guys, can you explain the agent's role in coordinating with other professionals to streamline the purchase process, ensure it's more efficient, and also give buyers like the feeling that we've got their backs when it comes to this, so they feel less stressed?
I think the most important thing for anybody who is a buyer or about to become a buyer is to really look at it as assembling a team, so that you have professionals around you that you can communicate with very quickly in real time, that you feel comfortable with and that you trust, and that who all, if and or when need be, can work together. So making sure that you have a really great mortgage broker who can go through numbers with you so that you understand them, and always make sure that you understand your options, so that you have a lawyer who, if issues come up, you can rely on them even prior to making an offer, just when looking at a property. And to know that if you're looking at a property that needs work, or may need work in the future, or may need repairs at some point in time, that you have all of that encompassed all in one. And I think that is super important, not just in acquiring a property, but long after you own the property.
I can think of a great story where multiple offers on a condo, but the listing agent did not have the status certificate.
Okay.
So offer day comes around. It's Tuesday, 4:00, and I submit the offer at 5 to 4 because I try to be conscientious about that. And the agent calls me and he's like, this is conditional on the status review. And I said, yeah, because you don't have it. And he said, yeah, we got it on Sunday. And I was like, thanks for letting us know. So now it's 4:00 and offers are coming in and he's got 3 or 4 of them. So I reach out to one of the lawyers that we know and I say, listen, here's the situation. Is there any possible way that somebody can look at this right now so I can take that out? And they said, yeah, absolutely. And they did it. And by 4:30, I resubmitted with it removed because the status was completely fine. But it was great to know that having a connection to an experienced professional who was willing to take our call, understood the situation, and said, I can jump all over this and help you out. Last summer, I took a contractor to look at a property for buyer clients because they were concerned about the quality of the stucco. We actually looked at 2 houses that night, and the contractor said, I think you're being a bit jumpy about this one. This one's perfectly fine. This one, you're absolutely right. It's, cause for concern.
Was it
Not done
stucco
well.
on the exterior?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what was the issue?
You could tell from the quality of it. Both of these houses, I think, were 15, 20 years old.
Mhm.
And the buyer's concern was moisture penetrating the back.
Oh,
So getting in between the styrofoam that's at the back of that and plywood and perhaps starting a mold problem. And that actually can potentially happen if stucco isn't done right. And on the second house, it was a bit sketch. But the question was, this house has been on the market for a while. If we could get it for the right price, is it worthwhile? How much would it cost to redo the stucco? But again, contractors, trades, inspectors who can come out at a moment's notice. And to Ralph's point, it's all about having a team. If you were going to build a house, you'd have a plumber, a roofer, all of these people doing separate jobs, specialists.
Mhm.
In this case, you're building the team to buy a house. So get all those specialists lined up. And oftentimes, if you don't know any of them, your buyer agent, if they're good and experienced, will have a list of options for all of these key players
And
for
they
you.
should.
And I cannot tell you how much damage I've seen that's been done to a process, to an offer, to an experience when you have a buyer agent and they insist on using a friend's father who is a lawyer in Ottawa and knows nothing about how things operate in Toronto. Or when somebody is like, yeah, I'm okay on the mortgage side, don't worry about it. And they're just using some retail person at TD, no offense, TD, or at any bank. And they just walk right into the ground floor and just speak to somebody who's probably been doing this for 10 minutes and their name tag is still basically wet. Those are where the problems happen. It becomes multiplied if there's lack of communication between everyone, which happens. And so it's really important to be guided by a team that really understands the market and can communicate with one another in a time-sensitive manner effectively.
yes.
Yes.
And the whole process of buying is about trust. And so if you're working with a trusted team with all of this network, you're going to feel so much better about what you're buying. You're going to have all your checks and balances in place before you acquire the property. And a good buyer agent is going to double, triple, quadruple check all of these things time and again before you make that offer. So you need that network. We rely on that network as buyer agents. They really are of huge value. And I know the main people that we work with in our inner circle at Fox Marin are like practically family at this point. And we could call them on Saturdays, we can call them Sundays, we can call them at 9:00 at night, and problems will be solved and fires will be put out and buyers will be feeling good about moving forward with their decisions. This is huge, huge. All right, moving on to number 4 of 8. This is the emotional filter. So buyer agents can serve as a buffer to emotional decision-making, offering objective advice and opening up possibilities in areas and homes you buyers might have not considered before. So what is the big value of having a professional who can maintain objectivity, help you navigate emotional decisions? And we know real estate is emotional. And then broaden your horizons on your property search. This is huge. I think this is like one of the big of the 8, actually, in terms of the role of the buyer agent is this emotional filter.
I touched upon it earlier at the beginning of this podcast, and I think it's so important because this is just such a highly emotional process. It's really interesting when you work with couples, and oftentimes they want very different things, and how they navigate, in fact, what it is that they want. It's a very terrifying process because it's just such a large amount of money, and the consequences, plus or minus, are very extreme. And people have never been put in these positions before. Or if they've had, it's never been to this degree, because even if they bought before, generally it's escalating. And so people tend to focus on the things that they can control, which is oftentimes small minutia that has nothing to do with the big picture of what they're actually trying to achieve. And so it's really important to be able to remind people why they're looking to do what they're doing, and how they're going to do it, and how you're going to help them get through it. Because otherwise, like we were talking about as well at the beginning of this, people get really caught up in analysis paralysis. People get in their own way. People doom scroll on Instagram. And none of this has anything to do with them or what their objective is, or why they actually set out to do what they're doing in the process. And when people walk into a property and they think about their children or future children or parents living in the basement, it becomes very, very emotional when people think about their lives and their future. And sometimes they're thinking about that, and you're like, as a buyer agent, I know you're thinking that way, but this is not the right opportunity for you. This is bad for a whole bunch of reasons. Or, you know what? I know you've offered on 4 properties and you've lost out on all 4 properties, but it's okay. We're going to work our way through this. I've been through this with clients before, and we're going to figure out a way how to learn from it and get better each time as we go, so that we will have a great resolve. I mean, there are just so many circumstances and instances where such a high, intense search can have so many different emotional outcomes, and it literally is a roller coaster. And people generally tend to think, oh, it'll be so fun. I'll get a coffee. We'll drive around. We'll look at some properties. I'll buy a place. It does not work like that.
Not at all.
It is very stressful. It moves oftentimes in a market like Toronto very quickly. And you need somebody there to help you work through this, to remind you objectively what you're actually looking to achieve and help you through that process.
Absolutely. It is a lot of money, and there's a lot of anxiety around making the wrong decision, right? So a great buyer agent will walk you through this, use their experiences, as Ralph was saying, to be like, if this is the right property for you, if you're getting the feels, let's walk through, everything that you've told me and every other property that we looked at, and how this applies to you and how this works, and the school district and all these great features, maybe even some features that you didn't know you wanted or you didn't know you could afford that this has got, right? So staying on the positive, but being a realist, being a good listener is really, really key, and hearing what the person's saying, knowing where that anxiety is coming from, and being able to say, I think this works. Or like Ralph said earlier, being on the side of, it's close, but I'm not sure that this is the one for you as well, right? But I think that being a great listener and really being able to turn that around and calm down people's fears is huge.
Last year, 2023, was such an unbelievable year because it was so intense emotionally with the highs and lows of the market. We saw so much of this at extremes. I cannot tell you how many phone calls we took of clients crying, literally just not knowing what to do, really being frustrated, really being upset, having challenges with their spouses in the process. There has just been so much emotional distraught. And it really is, if you're in this job, you have to have a very high EQ, and you really are a part-time therapist as you help people to work through, because there's just, people have so much stuff around things like money and things like making a mistake and things like their future and taking risks. And when you then throw in, the media and friends and neighbors and everybody putting all kinds of misinformation and bad advice into their minds, of course they're going to be very off balance. Of course they're going to feel very vulnerable. Of course they're going to be really destable. And it's your job. And that really is a huge component to why this is such a necessary profession, to help people on the buy side, is to help them work through all of that to get to the best outcome for them, and to remind them objectively of why what they started out to do is the right thing. It's just they're getting lost in all of the noise and all of the emotion and how to keep them moving forward in a way that's best for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so moving on to number 5 of 8, neighborhood education and due diligence. A great buyer agent should be able to provide insights into various neighborhoods. I know it's a shocker, including schools, the crime rates, the local trends, and then perform through due diligence checks on every property to uncover potential issues. And in fact, we just did an entire kick-ass podcast on this very topic. I mean, it is like the resource guide for you buyers out there. Be sure to check it out. I will link it in the show notes. It's got huge value when it comes to this very topic, all about good buyer agents and the due diligence checks that they do. So what exactly is the buyer agent's role in mitigating risks, identifying these red flags, and conducting kind of like in-depth investigations on a property, really, like going through the history and looking at potential hiccups down the road? Do you have anything you guys want to add to that? This is a big one as well, number 5.
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, we see this all the time on the listing side as listing agents when buyer agents come from outside the city or even outside of the area that we work in, and they just don't know what they don't know. And oftentimes it is to tremendous detriment of the buyer and to the benefit of the seller, which is the exact opposite of what should happen. So we will see a buyer agent give 24 or 48 hour irrevocables, meaning that's how long the offer takes before it expires. When if they were looking after their client's best interest and they understood how things work here, they would probably give 5 hours, 6 hours max. The longer the irrevocable, the more opportunity the seller can get multiple offers, their agent can get multiple offers. And so that's just one example, but a good buyer agent will know that, the bicycle hacks like next door is where a very known house is to the police in the area, where that's where they take stolen bikes and chop them up in the garage. There are a few of those in the city, if anyone is wondering. It's knowing where those are. It's understanding the importance of what school districts you want to be in, not from the Fraser Institute, but by the parents of the kids who actually go to these schools, because that's really what the school will tell you in real time. It's understanding, you know what, a subway might be coming through here. It's understanding a whole bunch of things. It's understanding, this is on the east side of the city. We should probably look into a termite inspection, et cetera, because it's known in Leslieville that there's lots of termite activity, or at the very least calling Etna. So there's just so many nuances that are really understood by people who live, work, and transact in these areas, that it's really important that somebody who's looking at purchasing a property be represented not by an app, but by an out-of-town agent, but by somebody who really lives and breathes that area, who can best advocate for them at all times.
Yeah, the buyer agent should be going to every length possible to ensure that the buyer is protected, especially when it comes to due diligence and fiduciary duties for that matter. I can give an example. One time we went way over and above, and Ralph, you might remember this story, but we had a niggle that this property in Rosedale, I don't know if we're talking about the same one, it may or may not have had an oil tank buried in the front yard, because that's often how furnaces were serviced back in the day. And I think the home inspection, or the pre-list home inspection, said there may or may not be an oil tank here, because there was some sort of hookup that they couldn't really follow to see if it was still active, or maybe it was dead, but the oil tank was still in the lot. And there could be seepage and a whole bunch of issues. So we couldn't really get an answer from the sellers. We couldn't get an answer from the selling agent. And we're like, shit, what do we do? And then I think we went back and looked at old archived listings, and we could see the reference to the furnace being sourced or fueled by oil. So we're like, shit, no one can answer this question. So Ralph and I actually drove ourselves to the Technical Standards and Safety Authority, where they have all the records of the oil tanks that have been removed there. So we drove there in person to this, government body, I'll call it, for lack of another term. We stood in the line, we got a number, we went up there and we're like, hi, we're agents. We drove out to, I don't know where we are exactly, some like industrial area. We need to check on the records of this property. And they were able to confirm in writing that the oil tank had been removed from that property, probably back in the 80s, I think, or even the 70s. So we were able to give our buyers like a huge sense of relief. Oil tank is not there, but that took some solid key eye work on our behalf to make sure that all the checks and balances were in place.
They don't teach you that at Humber College Realtor School.
No, they don't.
Nope.
You also can't Google what to do when that comes up.
This is not my buyer client, but this was a very scary story. And this will show you somebody who had not done enough due diligence. I had a listing last year in a condo building with lots of development going on around it. And I called before our listing went up. Somebody got a really good price for selling a unit there a month before. So I called that agent and I said, listen, I'm looking at yours. Congratulations, by the way. Great sale. You did very well. It's a great price, but it's a really, it's almost too good. Like, what do you attribute that to? And she said, I don't know. We were up on the market for a couple of days. Showings weren't going well. Somebody came in. They loved it. They threw the offer in like right away, and it was good and it was clean and we took it. And I said, do they know that there's a 40-story building going up right in front of that window that has that perfect view of the skyline? And she said, what? And I said, oh, so they don't know and you didn't know either. So you didn't tell them because you didn't know either. And she said, what do you mean? And I had, further to our previous podcast, actually done the due diligence on this before. And so I already had the picture of the building on this 3D rendering of this tower sitting right beside the unit she just sold. And I said, okay, well, good luck. I'm sorry you didn't know. I'm sorry to scare you. But but imagine that buyer when they find out that their agent, the listing agent, in all honesty, from what I could tell, didn't say anything about it. But if their agent didn't know and they get in there and discover that they're about to lose that big value.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point diligence. Is it's a buyer agent's responsibility to check that. You cannot lean on the listing agent to do that due diligence. That is the buyer agent's fault, and they should feel really shitty about that. Because it's really actually too easy to check. That is just common sense. You don't even need to check. If there's a parking lot next to the building, there's like a pretty good chance that a building is going up next to you. Like, nothing makes me more...
Tip,
yeah.
If there's a giant sign saying development application, that's a really, really good indication.
All right. Moving on to number 6 of 8, the home search itself. So while online listings are accessible, and we know that you're all obsessed with your Realtor.ca apps and your House Sigma apps, buyer agents, good buyer agents, can offer valuable insights, often identifying properties that might be overlooked or negotiating better deals for properties that might be slightly out of budget. So can you both explain how a good, excellent buyer agent might use their network or their knowledge to uncover opportunities and provide buyers with options that you might not necessarily find on your own, searching or scrolling through House Sigma?
Well, this is a huge one when it comes to your reputation amongst other agents as well. I think that's really important because as a good buyer agent, you might be getting heads up emails, notifications from other good agents who know that you work a particular pocket of the city to say, hey, listen, saw your sale the other day. That looks great. Saw your buy the other day. That looks great. I have this 3-bedroom home coming up next week. I have this condo coming up next week. If you've got anybody, if you want a preview.
I also think that a tenured buyer agent will be able to see opportunities and look at properties that might be overpriced, similar to what you mentioned, Ian, earlier about your clients where you had the wait and see approach. Mm-hmm. And if you're able to be like, okay, this property has been on the market for, I'm making this up, 40 days, it hasn't sold for whatever reason, this really does align with the characteristics that my buyer is looking for in terms of bedroom count, location, school district, driveway type, parking, and so on. But it's out of reach for them financially. So you're like, I have a feeling that this might be a good match, especially because it's been on the market for this amount of time. It's probably overpriced. A good agent will go see that property on their own. They will preview it. They'll get a feel for it. They'll call the listing agent. They'll have a conversation. And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes the seller is just testing the market. Sometimes it's not even the listing agent's fault that it's listed so high. The seller has said, I want to list it at this price for a certain amount of time to see if we get any bites. And a good agent is going to uncover things like that. Really being creative about opportunity is the buyer agent's responsibility. And that is like being able to see past hideous MLS photos, going and previewing properties, going to agent open houses. Ian, as you mentioned, having those great network with agents in the city that have good reputations where they can give you the inside scoop as to what might be coming, looking at those coming soon signs, all of that information. This is the buyer agent's job. They need to be hunting for these type of treasures. And if your agent's just depending on property matches spinning out on MLS, they're not doing anything.
I'll also go in the opposite direction. Sometimes they may see something that's underpriced and be like, I know this is something you wouldn't normally look at, and it's been sitting on the market and it's priced low, and you're probably wondering why. But you know what? If you were able to remove this one wall and open up into the kitchen and put in some pot lights and actually just did some landscaping in the front and put in a new bathroom, you could add a tremendous amount of value to this property, and you could see this property in a whole different light from the way that it's being done. And we've had other clients do similar things. And here, let me show you some examples.
That's a great point.
A really good buyer agent will say to their clients, you know what? I know you want to be in Leslieville, but if we just go just up to the upper beaches, I know it's a little bit outside. Oh, you've never been there before? Well, why don't we at least go there? And then when we go there, we've got all this extra buying power for the value that we can get. So a really good agent will be able to take people outside their comfort zones or show them things that they can't see or hadn't been able to see, and open their mind to these type of opportunities. And that's where it becomes invaluable.
Yeah. Such good points. All right. Moving on to number 7, cost effectiveness. Okay. So hiring a buyer agent is effectively free, as they are only paid upon the successful purchase of a home. And generally speaking, the commission fees are paid by the seller in most instances. So this is where many people feel that an agent is overpaid. And I think it'd be really helpful to our viewers out there to explain the hours, the months, or the years it can,
or never.
I was actually had that in my notes to say never, but you guys took away the dramatic effect.
We're so excited. The never guys.
So yeah, it can take years or never to find that right property. So I think this is really important. I think people just think we're like running around, dressed in our suits and grabbing a cappuccino.
We met you Monday.
Yeah.
We met you Monday. You were bought by Friday, right?
Never.
We showed you 3 places. Yeah, we made $1 million.
Yeah.
Never happens that way.
I don't think that's ever happened.
What's really interesting is if you look at the numbers, 90% of agents make no money. There's 74,000 agents in the GTA. Very few of them are actually making a decent amount of money. So it's like this tremendous misnomer on level 1, thinking that we all make a ton of money. Nope. Very few make actually any real money. And those are the ones who probably spend at least a decade paying their dues, learning their craft, building a business by advocating for their clients' long-term best interests. And those are the ones that are not parading around on Instagram in Lamborghinis. It's the exact opposite. And if you want to wonder why real estate agents are disliked, it's because these agents think that that's what you do to get business. That's actually what you do to get hated, by pretending to be something that you're not, by probably watching too many episodes of $1 Million Listing New York and $1 Million Listing LA. But that's really not how it is. And generally speaking, when you talk to those 1% agents, those top agents, they're actually really generally down to earth people who are very communicative with high levels of EQ, who work insane amounts of hours. This business is not for the faint of heart. And it's something that will eat you up and spit you back out
Yeah.
if you think that this is a get rich quick scheme. The amount of hours and constantly being on call and having to be there emotionally as well as objectively and mentally throughout the entire process, and then dealing with other agents on the other side, and the volatility and the stress of the market and the speed and the veracity with which it moves. To do this on any real level, it takes a tremendous amount of toll on somebody. And that's why you really see the high turnover that you see in this business. And that's why you see very few top 1% agents making any real money. The rest is just a facade on the Insta.
It totally is. It totally is. If anyone saw my true behind the scenes, I think they'd be like, this girl needs to be checked into a mental institute for like a good solid 2 weeks just to make sure she's okay.
Yeah. Oh, someone's crying on the phone to me again. What time is it? Oh, it's 11 a.m.
All right, we're moving on to the last one. Number 8, the importance of choosing the right agent, because not all agents are created equally, which is super true. So the choice of your agent significantly influences your home choice, your neighborhood, the financial outcome, and helps you to avoid overpaying and making poor choices. All right. I mean, I think this is just a given. Selecting the right agent that aligns with your style and your communication, that you can trust, that understands your needs. But where do people find this quality person in this sea of agents in Toronto?
A couple things you could do. Ask around and see people in your peer group who've had a really good experience working with somebody else. I think that's one real good way. The second way is to look, obviously, online. Things to look for online. Look at Google reviews. That's a huge, huge tell. Look at the website, and is it just a template website or is it a customized website? Look at the information and the way it's presented. Look at their past sales. Look at their Instagram account. Is everything current? Is everything up to date? If an agent can't represent themselves by thinking or talking about their own details, how are they ever going to do that for you? And it's really important to have a good feel and connection with somebody before you even speak to them while you're just researching them. And then it's important to have an interview process.
Yes.
Like, again, going back to NAR, National Association of Realtors, 75% of consumers work with the first agent that they come in contact with, which is just mind-blowing to me. People spend more time planning a vacation or finding a dog walker than they do really thinking about who is going to represent them on maybe the largest financial transaction and lifestyle transaction and decision they're ever going to make. Do the research and make sure you find a good fit, because it is not one fits all by any stretch, and not all realtors are created equal. And it's really important to find somebody that you can relate to and know that you can trust and help that, and they will be able to help guide you through the process.
Yeah, people who have had a good experience really, really want to tell you about that. So, sorry, Kori.
No.
I totally agree with Ralph. Like, ask around. Everyone knows at least one real estate agent. And if they're willing to refer you to them, that's wonderful. And then if you're a new buyer for the first time, you've probably got a lot of questions. Write those questions down. Use that as part of your interview process. Don't just see if you like them. Grill them. See how they answer questions. And here's a great first step. Take note of, reach out to each one that you want to interview and take note of how long it takes them to get back to you.
Yes.
Because if it takes somebody 3 days to get back to you after you've texted or called them, there's the first part of your interview right there, my friends.
Yes.
3 days, I like 15 minutes.
So it's crazy that people don't interview their potential buyer agent. And you know how much respect I had for people who interview us? Like, I want to work with people who want to interview the agent, because that means that they care and they're going to be great partners in buying real estate if they're putting in that homework up front. I love to get interviewed. I love it. I love when we get interviewed as buyer agents, and I love when we're in like competition to list a property, It means that the client cares about the process and they're going to be likely really great to work with. So never, ever, ever, ever be shy about it. And if somebody says that they don't take interviews, then they're not the right fit for you. Like, bye-bye.
100%. I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. And a good agent knows that if they will be happy to give you 30, 60 minutes right off the bat to be able to showcase for you what it is that they know. And they want to help you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. If somebody doesn't agree to an interview, I agree with you, Kori, that is not the right fit for you. That's somebody who maybe is just too busy or too arrogant to want to help you.
I've had friends that have become clients on the buy side, and I've done full buyer presentations for my friends. And we've sat together and gone over market stats, and all of them to this day is like, remember how awesome it was? Then we sat down at Starbucks and you brought me through this presentation. I'll never forget how prepared you were for our first meeting. And I treat my own friends, people I've known forever, where there's already trust built. Like, it matters to me that I'm doing a good job for them and showing that ability that I will do a great job for them because they could pick somebody else to work with. So that is big time. Well, I think these points are all awesome. I just think this is really valuable to bring up this topic. I think it's a really current topic, and I think it negates some of the stuff that's out there. And this is going to be a very robust year in Toronto real estate. So if you're looking to acquire a property and you want to get some of this due diligence done in advance, I think this podcast is a really great place to start, including some of the other resources that we've provided here. Take a listen. If you have questions or comments or ideas, just feel like you can post and reach out and ask us stuff. This is what we do day in and day out. And collectively, we've been in the business, I don't know, between the three of us, like 35 years between the three of us collectively. Wow. So
thank God for filters.
Thank God for filters. That's right.
Speaking of which, I don't know if it's the lighting or do I look really pale today? Yeah, it's weird.
Well, it is January.
Yeah.
Don't worry, my arms are glowing white.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on Toronto Real Estate Podcast. Today, we've uncovered the invaluable role of a buyer's agent in your home buying process. Remember, the right agent is not just an opening doors kind of person, but a huge asset in finding your ultimate home in Toronto. For more insights and real estate wisdom, stay tuned to our podcast. Kori, what do we like to get people to do?
I always want to remind everybody to contact us anytime, because around these parts of Fox Marin, we are super nice and approachable, and some of us are really hilarious.
Some more than others.
Call us and interview us.
Yes.
Please, right?
Yes.
And Ralph, what do we want people to do?
Oh, just thank you for watching, for listening, for giving us your time. If you've made it this far into our journey in today's episode, please be sure to smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch you on our next episode.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, guys. Good seeing you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.